As the fighting continues, nearly 1 million people have been uprooted from their homes in Idlib. Since the beginning of the civil war in 2011, the country has never seen so many people displaced in such a short period of time. And now, amidst the chilly winter, Syrians are finding shelter in the most unusual places. While some families were lucky enough to reach tent camps, others have taken to underground caves and prison cells. Families are being forced to hide in caves to escape from the winter cold.
من تحت عدوان الروسي اتجهنا من تحت القصف وطلعنا بأغراضنا وكل شيء لتحت. جينا على السجن فتحنا بإيدينا وقعدنا بالسجن. كل غرفة طولها بيجي 20 متر. قسمناها كذا عائلية بيجي 3-4 عيال فيها.
Thousands of people, mostly women and children, are on the move, fleeing towards the Turkish border. With the renewed offensive and more people heading towards the border, Turkey has now said that it will no longer stop Syrian refugees from reaching Europe. The threat to open the way to Europe would reverse a pledge Turkey made to the European Union in 2016. The 2016 EU-Turkey Accord was aimed to help end the chaotic arrival of migrants and refugees. The accord came after more than 1 million refugees reached Europe in 2015. Under that agreement, migrants and refugees who cross the Aegean Sea illegally are sent back to Turkey. But Ankara has repeatedly said that funding from Europe is too less, next to the $40 billion that Turkey claims it has spent. Turkey currently has over 3.5 million Syrian refugees on its territory. Turkish police, Coast Guard and border security officials have been ordered to stand down on refugees' land and sea crossings. This threat of sending refugees to Europe could, however, quickly draw the attention of the Western powers. After the announcement, refugees have now gathered to cross over to Greece. Hundreds of refugees gathered on the western shore after Turkey said that they are now welcome to reach the EU. Meanwhile, the laughing Syrian girl from the viral video has now started her new life. 3-year-old Syrian girl Salwa was seen blowing kisses to cameras as she arrived in Turkey. This comes a week after a video of her infectious laugh captured hearts around the world. Salwa's father, Abdullah Muhammad, came up with a game to help his daughter cope with the sounds of war. He encouraged her to simply laugh whenever bombs or shells landed in the vicinity. The video went viral, highlighting the impact that the 9-year-long war has had on the children of Syria. And now we have political analyst Ekrem Edi Gitzeldere joining us live from Berlin. Ekrem, thank you so much for joining us here on WION Dispatch. I want to begin by asking, at this stage we're talking about the most bloodiest phase of the Syrian civil war that is taking place at this point in time, and that is set to re-spark the refugee crisis all over again.
Yeah, but the times are different. It's no longer 2015. So even if the borders, the land and the sea border to Greece and Bulgaria are now open, the Balkan route is not open anymore, and therefore refugees that reach either a Greek island or a Greece mainland or Bulgarian mainland, they will be kept there in camps or be caught by the police. There is basically no chance that they reach Germany or Italy or any other more centrally located European country.
Right. Now, you're talking about a tug of war at this stage between Turkey and the rest of the world, really, because Turkey is now allowing the refugees who come into the Aegean Sea to move across freely to Europe, and that's exactly what the Accord of 2016 did not want to happen. Do you think that this will elicit an immediate, urgent response from the European Union?
No, I don't think so, because Turkey announced that it will only keep open the border for 72 hours. So Turkey wants to pressure the Europeans to help in the Syrian crisis, also to bring the Americans on board and to use the refugees as a threat that there could be more to come. So they are carrying refugees from Istanbul to Edirne, for example, with buses. People are allowed to use boats to reach the Greek islands, but this won't, in my view, have any further reaching consequences by the European Union, because they know that those refugees won't go any further than Greek islands or the border region with Greece and Bulgaria.
For now, it doesn't look like the fighting is going to stop in Idlib, with the fatalities increasing both on Turkey's side and Syria's side, and with the number of people seeking refuge from Syria in Turkey only increasing. What do you think is the near-term situation that we're looking at?
Yeah, we have, two scenarios. One is a further escalation also of military activities, and the other is a kind of modus vivendi for the time being between Turkey and Russia, who have had a phone conversation also today to stop the fighting and to stop also the refugee flow. We can't foresee which of the two options will materialize, and we will all see in the coming hours. Turkey has brought a lot of military equipment to the border, tanks, also planes, and seems to be prepared to retaliate also militarily, but the costs will be very high, because even if it says that Syria is the culprit and Syria is acting, it can only act because it is backed by Russia, and the number one and most important actor in Syria is Russia. And if there's not an agreement between Turkey and Russia, then Turkey unfortunately cannot do much.
Right. Ekrem Eddie Gitzel there, joining us live from Berlin with that perspective. Thank you so much for being with us here on WION World is One. In 9 years of war, more than half of the Syrian people have been displaced, but there has never been so many fleeing so fast. Our next report delves deeper into the exodus.
These buildings once housed foreign Islamic State fighters. Now, families fleeing the battles in Idlib province are quickly filling up the apartments. It is the fastest exodus since Syria's civil war began 9 years ago. Once they arrive, families try to repair the buildings, saying they don't expect to go home anytime soon.
We had to flee. The memories are killing me inside. Imagine someone bleeding to death in front of you, and yet you cannot do anything. You are a human, and they are also a human.
Many people say they spent hours, sometimes days, to get here, to this relatively safe place. Most of the nearly 1 million displaced from Idlib in the past 3 months have gone north, towards the closed Turkish border, where aid groups have run out of shelters and children have frozen to death. If the war ends as expected, in a victory for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, some families say they cannot go home because Idlib is known as a rebel stronghold, and they fear the government will arrest them, whether they were part of the rebellion or not. Local leaders say the only solution to the displacement crisis in Idlib after the war will be an agreement guaranteeing returnees' safety.
The solution is security and stability. People can go home when the bombing stops. But the government has taken our area, so people won't return without a safety agreement. No one dares to go back now.
But families say no agreement will bring back their loved ones, and that all of the current warring parties in Idlib are responsible for the carnage.
I saw my own son die in front of me and another one was injured. How can I possibly forget? What about my husband? I don't know where he is. What if I lose him as well? It's best to stay here.
Aid workers expect the amount of families fleeing to surge when the battle reaches the provincial capital. More than half of the displaced are children. Heather Murdoch, VOA News, Raqqa, Syria.
US-Taliban truce takes effect. Stage set for Afghan peace deal. India invited to Doha high table. Will US-Taliban deal end the war? WION reports from Ground Zero.
The US-Taliban peace deal will be signed in Doha tomorrow, and both India and Pakistan are going to be a part of the final talks. WION World is One will get you ground reports from Doha, as we've already been. Our reporters Mustafa Kazemi, Anas Malik and Siddhan Sabal getting you round-the-clock updates on this crucial agreement. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is already in Qatar ahead of the deal. This is his second visit to Qatar after he became the Prime Minister in 2018. However, Imran Khan will not be attending the signing ceremony of the landmark deal. Instead, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi will be representing Pakistan at the event. The peace is the result of a 14-month-long painstaking negotiation process between the US and the Taliban, facilitated by Pakistan. It was supposed to be signed in the month of September last year, but President Trump called off the talks at the last minute due to continuing Taliban attacks targeting American forces. Later, another stumbling block emerged after the Taliban sought more time to talk to other Afghan groups, even as the US pushed for an intra-Afghan dialogue within 10 days of the peace deal. This prompted US Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad to make an unannounced visit to Islamabad on the 31st of January, seeking Pakistan's help to convince the Taliban for an intra-Afghan dialogue. Reports say Pakistan managed to break the stalemate, and Taliban is expected to attend the intra-Afghan dialogue on the 10th of March, which will be held either in Norway or in Germany. So the question is, what is Islamabad getting out of this? Sources say that the US and Afghanistan have already been addressing some of Pakistan's security concerns. Pakistan wants the US to eliminate anti-Pakistan elements operating out of Afghan soil. In addition to this, Pakistan is also seeking US support to come out of the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF's grey list. On the other hand, Indian envoy in Doha will be a part of the Afghan peace deal. Meanwhile, India's Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla will be in Kabul. He will call on Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani. US President Donald Trump had also discussed this deal with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his recent India trip. Trump later said that India would also like to see this deal happen. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani has postponed his inauguration on US request. This after Washington raised concerns that the controversy over his re-election might hamper the signing of the peace deal with the Taliban. In a statement, the US State Department asked Afghan authorities to address concerns over election rigging. This after Ashraf Ghani's rival Abdullah contested the poll results and declared himself the winner. According to some reports in the Afghan media, Abdullah is even planning a rival inauguration. The confusion over the September 2019 election results have further weakened the position of the Afghan government, which is officially not part of the US-Taliban talks. This as the Taliban rejected the Kabul-based government as a puppet regime. However, both Washington and Taliban have said that they will hold separate talks with the Afghan government.
We're currently in a 7-day reduction in violence period that started on February 22nd. In 19 years of war, this is the first week-long break in violence by all sides if we're successful in achieving it. If, and only if, it's successful, we will sign the US-Taliban agreement coordinated with the Government of National Unity on or about February 29th that includes a timeline for both a conditions-based and phased troop withdrawal and for the commencement of intra-Afghan negotiations.
Meanwhile, the week-long observance of reduction in violence is underway in Afghanistan. Remember, the negotiations resumed after Taliban agreed to reduce violence, while the US said that it will not carry out operations against the terror group. As per the peace deal, which will be signed in the Qatari capital of Doha on the 29th of February, Taliban will give up arms in exchange of US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. Taliban will also help Washington in the fight against Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The US has also agreed to certain security arrangements proposed by the Taliban as it seeks to end its longest war in history. Let's now take a look at the timeline of events that led to the Afghanistan peace deal that is set to be signed tomorrow. In July 2018, US officials secretly met Taliban members in Qatar. Towards the end of the same year, Taliban announced a meeting with the US officials to find a quote-unquote roadmap to peace. In February 2019, intra-Afghan talks took place between the Taliban and other Afghans in Moscow and did not include the Afghanistan government. In the same month, peace talks began between the Taliban and the US in Qatar. 2 months later, Afghanistan's government hosted a 4-day-long Loya Jirga, that is a special legal assembly for peace efforts for which the Taliban was not present. In August 2019, the US and Taliban completed 8 rounds of talks in Qatar. In the next month, that is September 2019, the US announced a withdrawal of 5,400 troops within 20 weeks as part of this agreed deal. Following that announcement, President Trump cancelled the peace deals and the peace talks with the Taliban. Later, Taliban sent a delegation to Moscow in Russia to discuss prospects for US troop withdrawal, and then the Taliban reached out to the US for talks, saying that the US has the most to lose. In September 2019, Zalmay Khalilzad was appointed as US President Donald Trump's special representative on Afghanistan. On the 12th of October 2019, he met Taliban in Qatar for the first time. Next month, November, Taliban representative and US special envoy met for the second time. On the 3rd of December, Trump sent a letter to Pakistan asking for help with the peace process. And December 2019, Afghan Taliban representatives met with US officials in Abu Dhabi, but on the 30th of December, Taliban dismissed Afghanistan's peace talks offer, and on the 6th of January, Taliban demanded a shift in venue. On 14th of January, US set forth 2 demands for the Taliban going further. And on the 22nd of January, the US and Taliban resumed talks in Qatar. By 24th, they were extended for 2 more days. Taliban appointed Mullah Baradar as the head of the Qatar office. And in February, Afghan National Security Council announced a week-long reduction in violence beginning the 22nd of February. Now, and now we have our correspondents joining us with ground reports from Doha and India. We have Anas Malik, our Pakistan bureau chief, currently in Doha in Qatar, joining us live here. And we also have Siddhant Subal, our principal diplomatic correspondent, joining us live from India's capital, New Delhi. Anas, we come to you first. Talk to us about the latest from Doha.
Well, the stage is all set, Krishna. The signing ceremony is to be held at a separate convention center that will have more or less about 1,500 people. That includes people from all walks of life. That includes delegates, dignitaries, invitees, special guests, media and security. About 1,500 people are to witness this signing ceremony that starts at 2 p.m. That is scheduled to start at 2 p.m. Qatar time, 2 p.m. Doha time, and it will last for about 90 minutes till 2 hours. That is what is being told by the officials over here. We're expecting US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to show up, though the US side is yet to officially announce, for that matter, that who would be representing the US on this historic deal, on signing of this historic Afghan peace agreement, given that the country has suffered for the past 19 years due to this war at the hands of both the Taliban and the US, and the commoners in Afghanistan have suffered the most. Now, if you talk about those who are currently here in Doha, we've seen the Uzbek foreign minister going in, we've seen the Kazakh foreign minister going in, we've seen the Tajik foreign minister going in. We're expecting the Russian special envoy for Afghan peace, Mrs. Zabir Kabulov, to arrive later in a while from now. We're expecting Zalmay Khalilzad, the Afghan special envoy for Afghan peace, the American special envoy for Afghan peace, to arrive in a while from now, and the Pakistani foreign minister as well, who has camped here right behind me at this hotel at the Sheraton Grand, where this historic peace deal signing is to take place. Now, there is some skepticism with regards to the sustainability of this peace agreement, given the fact that what the sources within the Taliban are claiming, that they would due to this signing, it would pave way for an intra-Afghan negotiation that are to take place in about 10 to 12 days from the signing of the agreement at a European country. That is what is being maintained, but how fruitful that be, there is a bit of skepticism in that. But certainly tomorrow, when this in less than 24 hours from now, when this agreement is signed, 16 months and 17 days later, this would be that headway that Zalmay Khalilzad has achieved, would have achieved rather, for which he was appointed for on the 5th of September in 2018. Yes, Krishna.
Anas Malik joining us live from Doha. Let's now take this across to our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal joining us live from New Delhi. Siddhant, India is at the high table when this deal will be signed, and talk to us in terms of how is New Delhi viewing the developments leading up to the signing of the deal.
Well, yes, India will be in the room when the signing of the agreement happens between Taliban and the United States. India, along with other countries, including Pakistan and Russia. And this is a moment of huge geopolitical significance because this could pave way for the American troops to leave Afghanistan after 19 years. India, of course, has played an important role in Afghanistan in its development needs, in infrastructure development, in capacity building, from community projects till major infrastructure projects like the Afghan parliament in Kabul or the Salma Dam or the India-Afghan Friendship Dam in western province of Herat. India has been lauded for its entire projects, but it is having some kind of issues as well, because the last time we saw Taliban in Afghanistan, we know that Pakistan had a huge role in Kabul. It had a very huge negative role, and it has an unofficial policy also of having a deep strategic interest in Kabul and a bleeding India. So India would not like to see a repetition of that. In fact, India has conveyed to the Americans many times that in the aftermath of this deal, India would not like that Pakistan has its own influence and has its own terror bases in Afghanistan, which might be used against India. So this is something that is of a worry, but largely we know that it has been a major point of discussion between the Indians and the Americans. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister and the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who was in Delhi, spoke at length on Afghanistan. The drawdown of troops was discussed, and this was agreed that the gains made in last 19 years will not be reversed. So this is something that has been kept in mind. But the fact that India has been called and will be witnessing the signing of the agreement, it means an acknowledgement of India's role in the Afghan peace process, because there were naysayers, there were countries like Pakistan who were saying that India has no role, but India as a development partner is considered a major partner of Kabul. In fact, we also know that Afghan government is very, very pro-India and of course is anti-Pakistan for repeated interference by Pakistan, not just in last 19 years, but before that as well. We know that the role Pakistan has been playing in destabilizing Afghanistan. So this is something that has been always on the table. But if you look at India-Taliban relationship, it hasn't been a good story. We know that in the hijacking of the flight IC-814 in 1999, it was taken from Kathmandu to Kandahar, and Taliban, at the behest of Pakistan, especially its notorious agency, the ISI, had blocked the evacuation of the Indian hostages. So these are the memories India has, but India also acknowledges that Taliban could have a major role in Afghan society, in the government in Kabul. So what will be the new relationship between India and Taliban is something worth waiting and watching.
Siddhant Sibal joining us live from New Delhi. Before we wrap up quickly, Anas, talk to us in terms of what to expect in Doha over the next 12 hours or so.
Well, we're expecting 26 representatives from 26 countries here in Doha. So we're expecting the arrival of Zalmay Khalilzad, as I said, the American Special Rep for Afghan Peace. We're expecting the arrival of the Chinese rep as well, and alongside the Russian rep for Afghanistan, Mr. Zamir Kabulov. Alongside that, we might see some representation from Iran, because we've seen that has been said by time and again from all the parties that yes, Iran has had a role to play as well with regards to the Taliban. So we might just see that there might be some representation. What sort of representation, it's still unclear, but what I can confirm that there would be representation from 26 countries, and with India being represented by the ambassador to Doha, whereas the Pakistani side would be represented by the Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Yes, Krishna.
Anas Malik joining us live from Doha, and Siddhant Sibal joining us live from India's capital, New Delhi. Thank you, both of you, for being with us here on the broadcast. After 19 years of a grueling conflict that has claimed the lives of more than 100,000 people, the war in Afghanistan may finally be coming to an end. Our next report takes a look at an internal political crisis that has now threatened to derail the entire peace process.
The Shorturl checkpost on the Kabul-Kandahar highway used to constantly be under attack by the Taliban. Since the start of the partial truce, the soldiers guarding the post are breathing a sigh of relief.
We used to face relentless attacks. Every day, every night, we faced immense difficulties. Now things are much better.
The same is true for shopkeepers in the Durrani Bazaar in Wardak province. They've even increased their business hours.
I used to close my shop at 5 p.m., but now that there is a ceasefire, I close my shop at 6 p.m. We have not heard any gunfire in the last 2 days.
After 19 years of war, the United States and the Taliban agreed to a week-long partial truce. At the end of it, if all goes well, they will sign a deal on the 29th of February in Qatar's capital, Doha. The deal outlines a roadmap for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, one of President Donald Trump's campaign promises. It also requires the Taliban to negotiate with other Afghans, including the government, on the future direction of their country. In Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Tuesday the goal is to reach an Afghan solution.
Our mission set is very clear. We want to assist and provide structure so that the Afghans can ultimately get an outcome that is led by Afghanis, driven by Afghanis, and is a long-term solution that all of the people of Afghanistan can live with.
But the Afghan government is in turmoil following presidential elections in which two candidates, incumbent Ashraf Ghani and rival Abdullah Abdullah, have declared victory. The bitter standoff comes at a time when Afghan politicians should be building consensus on how to negotiate with the Taliban, says analyst Michael Kugelman.
And yet, at that very moment when you most need that common united front, these long-standing divides within the Afghan political class have been exacerbated because of this political crisis coming out of the elections.
Getting various Afghan factions to come together in one representative team to negotiate with the Taliban was already difficult. Observers say this crisis has just added to it. Aisha Tanzim, VOA News, Islamabad.
And with that, we wrap up this edition of WION Dispatch. We are leaving you with something special. A Russian free diver who set a new Guinness World Record. He swam 180 meters under ice in a single breath, and the lap lasted for nearly 3 minutes. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar.